Hi there, you're watching Market Cafe on ET Now with me Shreyanshi Singh, and with me as always is Snehi Shah. Over the next 1 hour we'll take you through news and updates from within the country as well as across the globe, tell you which stocks to keep on your radar and tell you what the brokerages are also saying bright and early this morning. But first things first, let's take a look at the handover coming in from the Wall Street. And Snehi, good moves coming in at least from S&P 500 as well as Nasdaq, right?
Well, absolutely. So let's take a look at what the US markets are up to. Hi there, good morning, and let me take you through what the US handover is looking like. And when you take a look at all of these three indices on the spot basis yesterday, Dow has had a little bit of a tumble yesterday. 0.3% lower is where that index closed. You had S&P 500 and Nasdaq, however, they've closed in the green. S&P 500 up 0.3%. Nasdaq was a real outperformer among all of these three indices, closed with gains of almost 0.9%. So 150 point uptick coming in on the Nasdaq yesterday as well. Now, when you take a look at what stock futures were up to, stock futures oscillated near the flat line last night as investors awaited the Fed Reserve's interest rate decision as well as May's consumer inflation data. Now, in extended trading, Oracle jumped 9% as traders fixated on the software maker's newly announced cloud deals with Google and AI, overlooking misses in the company's latest quarter. Now, yesterday's trading session, investors' rotation into Apple helped lift the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq to fresh closing highs once again. Remember, yesterday also both of these indices have closed at a record high, and that rally continues for both of these indices as well. The iPhone maker announced its push into artificial intelligence at its developer conference week, fueling a rally in the stock. The Dow was the outlier, like I mentioned, it lost 0.3%. And now on the data front, investors are looking forward to Wednesday's conclusion of the Fed's two-day policy meeting. And when you talk about it in Indian parlance, you will be getting it somewhere around midnight, a little before midnight in Indian timings. So the impact of this will be seen in tomorrow's trading session. Now, this will feature a rate policy decision and a subsequent press conference with Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Now, while the market is pricing that the Fed will maintain its benchmark overnight borrowing rate in a range between 5.25 to 5.5, the market will be watching for central bankers' updates to the summary of economic projections, which could clarify the path for policy ahead. Investors have grown increasingly concerned that the recently strong jobs report and sticky inflation support a higher for longer interest rate environment. May's Consumer Price Index print, which is a broad measure of goods and services cost, will also be released on Wednesday. Remember, this is going to be just before the Fed releases its outcome on the repo rates as well. So the CPI print is going to be coming first, followed by what the Fed has to say. It's going to be a very interesting day, and for us it's going to be a very interesting night to watch out for what happens on that front as well. So lots is happening when it comes to the US. Now, May's Consumer Price Index, which is a broad measure of goods and services cost, will also be released, like I just mentioned. So lots happening on the US markets front. Dow is the only outlier, cuts of 0.3%, but S&P and Nasdaq are doing pretty well. But while that was the US markets, let's just focus and talk about European markets, because European markets are largely in the red and very, very sharp cuts coming in from Europe this morning. You have DAX, which is closed 0.7% lower, a 125 point cut on that index. FTSE has closed 1% lower, 80 points lower, that index as well. And the Pan-European Stock 600 index is also an entire 1% lower. So all of these markets have not done pretty well in yesterday's trading session. But well, that was largely on the equity front. But Shreyanshi, tell us what is happening with gold, and also then take us through what's happening with oil.
Absolutely. So gold prices, there's not much happening, but then the picture sort of remains intact. Whatever we've seen happen is what we're seeing play out at this point, because gold prices did edge up despite an uptick in the US dollar, and as investors awaited key US inflation data and the conclusion of the US Federal Reserve's two-day monetary policy meeting as well, like Snehi mentioned. And that also is something that we saw the gold investors also taking note of. Now, when you take a look at crude oil futures, then they held on to gains Tuesday as OPEC stuck to its demand forecasts, counting on steady economic growth this year. So oil prices rallied more than 2% on Monday, with the US crude oil booking its best day since February 8th. And the market has recovered the losses from the last week, where we saw that sell-off to 4-month lows in the wake of the decision by OPEC Plus to increase crude production in October. That is something that had investors quite jittery, and that is something that we saw an impact of on prices as well. Let's take a look at prices then, and when you take a look at WTI, you're looking at $77 per barrel levels. So an uptick of about 16 cents or 0.2%, and year-to-date US oil has gained about 8.7%. When you take a look at Brent as well, you're looking at $81 per barrel levels and an uptick of 29 cents or 0.4% thereabout, and year-to-date that contract as well is ahead 6.3%, so that's the kind of advance that you're seeing there on a year-to-date basis. Now, money managers cut their net long position in Brent by 69% week over week to the lowest level since 2014 in the wake of the OPEC Plus decision. And that was something that JP Morgan highlighted, and despite the bearish sentiment last week, Goldman Sachs also forecast that the market will be entering into a deficit on summer fuel demand that will push Brent back up to $86 per barrel in the third quarter. Now, traders are of course looking ahead to the conclusion of the Federal Reserve meeting and US inflation data for May that we've talked about earlier, and the IEA will also be releasing their monthly oil market report on the same day as well. And you also have, let's stay with the oil market, and you also have OPEC that has come out with some commentary, and they've retained their forecast for relatively strong global growth in global oil demand in 2024, and the stance retained despite lower than expected use in the first quarter. Now, OPEC believes that travel and tourism will aid consumption in the second half of the year, and the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies has also said that demand will rise by 2.25 million barrels per day in 2024 and by 1.85 million barrels per day in 2025. Now, both forecasts were unchanged from the last month, so there is some key commentary coming in on that front as well, Sneha.
Absolutely. Let's also take a look at all the important events that you need to be watching out for in today's trading session. Lots to watch out for. In terms of our Indian markets today, you have trade data and you also have industrial production as well as the all-important CPI coming out. Now, for the US markets, like we told you, CPI followed by that FOMC rate decision, that's going to be happening. Also from China, you can see on the ticker as of now, you have consumer prices that have come out. So the CPI and PPI print have come out. We'll take you through all of those numbers as and when we have more details on them. Now, shifting focus back home, let's also talk about what's happening on the corporate action front. It's going to be the investor day of Tata Communications. So it's going to be a stock to watch out for today. The board of Sasuke and Tech is going to be meeting for general purposes. It's also the last day to buy the shares of Tata Chemicals to be eligible for their dividend. 361 is going to be one to watch out for because they will be rolling out a preferential issue of shares. And lastly, watch out for Sobha in today's trading session, because that board is going to be meeting to mull fundraising today. So it's going to be an interesting stock to watch out for as well. On the primary markets front, it's the last day to subscribe for the Ixigo IPO. So watch out for that as well. And in other news, we also have a PPI from Japan that we'll talk you through that as well. And in terms of what's been happening back home, the chief ministers of Odisha as well as Andhra Pradesh are all set to take oath today. So watch out for all of these events in today's trading session.
Well, absolutely. Lots of cues to take note of and keep an eye on. An important day shaping up for the US on the macro front in a dual strike that starts this morning with the consumer price index reading and ends with the Federal Reserve's policy meeting as well. Investors will gain insight on the direction of the economy and whether policymakers can finally start easing stance anytime soon. May CPI is largely expected to log an annual rise of 3.4%, numbers not dramatically different from that April reading as well. Meanwhile, Street largely expects the central bank to hold rates alongside all eyes will be on their inflation as well as growth projections for the years to come. And the informal consensus on the street is that the Fed will adjust the path of its pivotal dot plot upwards. So that is an important update that we'll be keeping an eye on as well.
Well, and the macro story doesn't end here because back in Asia, both China and India inflation figures will be in focus. China's annual inflation rate was at 0.3% in May, holding steady for the second straight month while falling short of market forecasts of 0.4%. It was the fourth straight month of consumer inflation amid an ongoing recovery in domestic demand. Now, separately, India's inflation rate is also forecast to climb marginally to 4.89% according to economists' polls, slightly higher than what we saw coming in April at 4.83%.
Well, absolutely. And meanwhile, the World Bank has pegged India's economic growth at 6.7% for the financial year 2026, says India will remain the fastest growing large economy, and they've also retained the financial year 25 growth rate at 6.6%. The bank has also raised its forecast for the global and American economy up from its previous estimates for 2024, and a downgrade has come for regions like Africa as well as the Middle East.
Alright, let's shift focus and talk about some stock-specific action then. Apple shares have closed higher by 7% on a fresh record high of $207.15 per share. Moves follow that long-awaited announcement from the company on AI at its annual developer conference. Analysts believe the new AI features will drive consumers to upgrade their devices since the tools are only available on newer models.
I think he does have a viewpoint that I think some people do share in terms of data privacy, data integrity. But I think Apple is, I think in terms of, I think there would be very good data privacy guidelines that they will implement. First with the permission that I think the users would need to basically check, right, that box. And I think they do regionally in their own data centers. On the hardware side, they plan to use their own chips in their data centers. So that will be upholding a very high security standards. And so a lot of, I think the chat data or the access data, especially I think this time the chatbot will be released that's basically a much smarter chat. So I think I do not have very large concern on the data privacy.
Alright, there you have it. So that was the view coming in from Ray Bong, partner at Asymmetry Capital, and exactly what he had to say about Apple's growth roadmap as well. Meanwhile, you did have Oracle that jumped as much as 11% in after-hours trade after the stock maker announced cloud deals with Google as well as OpenAI despite fourth quarter results that fell short of expectations. Revenue increased 3% year over year during the quarter, and their cloud services and license support segment generated $10.23 billion in revenue, a growth of 9%.
Alright, well, it was a winning day not only for Oracle but also for Spotify shares because they too soared as Wall Street bulls gave a thumbs up to the company's plans to hike prices for its premium US subscription plans. Remember, the stock is up about 70% since the start of the year, so big moves already coming in, and the upcoming price hikes, which begin in July, are between $1 and $3. Analysts say the move could mean more increases for other music streamers, much to the chagrin of consumers.
Alright, then those were your daily dose of global updates coming in to go with your morning cup of coffee. But we'll take a quick break right here. We'll come back with to look at how the Asian markets are faring.
Hi there, welcome back. You're still watching Market Cafe. Now, on the very first day of taking charge as the Petroleum Minister, Hardeep Singh Puri yesterday said that they remain confident of achieving the 25% ethanol blending target by 2025. Also, when he was asked if they are considering bringing petrol and diesel under the gambit of GST, he responded with by saying efforts are on. Let's go across and listen in to what exactly he meant, and let's listen in from the man himself.
In the month of May, for a month alone, on a month alone basis, we were able to cross 15% of ethanol blending. So I can tell you that on the basis of what I have seen and the basis of the work in progress, I am reasonably confident that the 20% blending target, which was brought forward from 2030 to 2025, will be completed by the 2025 ethanol year.
पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स अंडर जीएसटी, ये बहुत स्टेटमेंट आते, क्या एक कंसेंसस बनाने की कोशिश होगी?
मैं आपको एक चीज बताऊं, आपकी शब्दावली मुझे बहुत पसंद है। कोशिश होगी, आंसर इज कैटेगोरिकली कोशिश होगी। No, hold on. I am giving you my philosophical approach. I mean, as the line minister, you say कोशिश होगी means you try. I said yes, we will try. Both MOS and I will both work on it.
Well, that was the word coming in from HS Puri, but let's move on then and get you an exclusive conversation. We caught up with Modi Cabinet 3.0's youngest minister, Ram Mohan Naidu. At 36, the three-time member of parliament is the youngest minister of the cabinet as of now, and he also replaced Jyotiraditya Scindia as India's civil aviation minister. Listen in to this exclusive conversation that my colleague Sameer Dikshit had with him.
For civil aviation department, this sector, we are entering into a golden era, considering what is happening in the country and the way world is also moving, a lot of people are preferring air travel, and there are a lot of more technologies that are coming into air travel, civil aviation. Absolutely. So there is a lot of scope for development, and there's a lot of potential. My priority would be taking all these things, whatever I've said, and how do you give it as a benefit? How do you give it as a advantage to the common man of this country? So we have to link all this to the common person that is living in India.
Now, one interesting aspect is from Hawai Chappal to Hawai Udan. That is one of the big scheme in the aviation sector,
Yes.
and you are now going to take it forward.
Yes. Definitely we are going to take it forward, and that is one of the principle also for us. Earlier, Hawai Jahaj ka travel, air travel used to be only for the rich class, only for the luxurious, and it was for a specific set of people. But now more and more people are preferring it. In future also you will see it is going to cross the first class or AC travel of railways also. It's going to be the new railways of India, the air travel. And to make that a reality, you have to take certain policy decisions.
My last question, इतने लोग आते हैं आपसे मिलने के लिए, अभी इन लोगों की तरफ से मेजर डिमांड क्या है कि सर वी वांट एयरपोर्ट की हमारा एयर फेयर हवाई किराया, मेजरली व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ इनपुट्स दैट यू आर गेटिंग इन एंड when is the first time you are going to do?
Let me tell you, most of these people have come from Andhra Pradesh and all.
Okay.
So their major intention is do good. One thing I would say is that improve the infrastructure in the airports.
Okay.
Second is that the prices of the tickets have risen for some whatever reason. So I specifically am not an expert right now, so I can't comment on that. But I really want to delve into this issue. I want to have a special meeting with my department also.
Alright, that's the word coming in from the new Civil Aviation Minister. But let's move on. And the newly formed NDA government is likely considering two options for the Parliament's budget session. This according to an Economic Times report this morning. The first option is a split session starting on the 24th of June with the budget presentation on 22nd July. The second option is a single sitting from the 1st of July. In the split session, the first part from 24th June to 3rd July would include the oath taking of new MPs, election of the Lok Sabha Speaker and the President's address. The second part from 22nd July to 9th August would focus on the Union budget. However, the single session option would run from the 1st of July to 2nd August, combining all activities into one continuous period. Now, with policy continuity ensured, how is this going to impact the entire PSU basket? We've spoken about everything that's been happening on the political front, but now that we have some sort of outlook on what policy continuity is going to look like, what impact is this going to have on the markets and the PSU space in particular? Is there more run-up or is this space overdone? Here out from the top market voices, the likes of Milind Karmakar, Vikas Khemani as well as Manish Sonthalia.
If there is earnings growth, then you look at the PE and then you decide whether to buy or not. But otherwise, anything to do with PSU going up, I think it was a sentiment-driven rally, which in all probability will stop.
I think what will continue, in my opinion, same building, push on infrastructure, push on manufacturing. Prime Minister has spoken many times about, how we need to become self-reliant. So I think those policies will continue. I think, the reforms, especially in some of the critical sectors, will continue. I mean, whether it was power, infrastructure, everywhere, I think lots of things were happening and maybe, they will continue. Especially one sector where I think it can become bigger is probably power.
I think given where valuations of the private sector units are, the capex continuity, particularly in railways, defense, power, the private counterparts are actually trading at significantly higher valuations. And when you have a situation when, the internal machinery in the PSUs is being geared up for growth and creation of market cap and rewarding shareholders and all stakeholders, I think there is a case for a re-rating in the PSU space, even from these levels.
Right, then that was the word coming in from the experts on the PSUs. But let's switch gears then. And Ola Electric has received a SEBI nod for its IPO. We're learning from our sources that Ola is looking to raise up to 5,500 crores via a fresh issue. My colleague Anurag Joshi is standing by with more details. Anurag?
The Securities and Exchange Board of India has cleared potentially the first IPO from EV startup the capital market regulator has approved the IPO plan of Ola Electric Mobility. Now, Ola Electric had filed its draft red herring prospectus, which is the draft IPO document, with SEBI at the end of 2023, in December 2023, and had been waiting for SEBI approval. Now, the SEBI clearance also comes at a time when two other IPOs are there in the primary market. So we have the technology, the travel platform Ixigo, which is currently underway, and Office, which is a co-working startup, is also currently, they did an IPO in May. The Ola Electric IPO has 8 book running lead managers, and it has a size of 55 billion rupees, and it also includes an offer for sale from the existing shareholders, including the founders, that includes Bhavish Agarwal.
Hello Anurag, thanks so much for taking us through that. Let's shift focus and talk about the entire real estate space, because that space was up and buzzing yesterday, and real estate developers as well as home financiers were up and away in yesterday's trading session on the back of their extension of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana scheme. But in a major crackdown, the Maharashtra Real Estate Regulatory Authority, which is the MahaRERA, has halted the registration of 1,750 housing projects across the state due to lapses, with more action looming for an additional 1,137 projects. Home buyers are being urged to exercise caution as the regulatory body intensifies efforts to ensure transparency and accountability in the entire real estate space. My colleague Anurag Shah has more details on this action. Good morning, Anurag. Take it away.
Maharashtra Real Estate Regulatory Authority MahaRERA has taken a major action on 1,750 real estate projects across the Maharashtra. MahaRERA has halted their registration, which means their temporary registration has been suspended. After this action, these projects will not be able to sell flats. These projects will not be able to advertise their projects after this action. So these projects are located across the Maharashtra. Highest number in Mumbai metropolitan region, 761 projects, followed by Pune region, 628 projects, North Maharashtra 135, Vidarbha 110 projects, and Marathwada 100 projects. So MahaRERA has also advised home buyer to exercise caution when considering investment in these lapse projects. So details of all these projects MahaRERA has put up on their website also, so home buyer can check MahaRERA website and can know the complete details of these 1,750 projects. So these projects, firstly, the show cause notice was issued to 6,638 projects. A 30-day time was given, so the developers can submit their details, they can comply with it. But after the RERA deadline also, 1,750 projects were unable to submit their documents. So after this only, RERA has taken this stringent action.
All right, thanks Anurag for that update coming in on registrations. Let's move on then, and we have a jam-packed lineup for you on the market. At 9:20, we'll be in conversation with Gautam Trivedi, Managing Partner at EPN Capital, to talk about the markets and more and see what he sees shaping up for the sectors as well. At 9:35, then we'd be talking to Harmohan Sahni, CEO at Raymond Realty, to talk about the mega redevelopment project in Bandra East that the company has. And at 9:45, then we'd also be talking to Sanjay Kulshrestha, CMD at Hudco, to talk about the PMAY boost for the housing financiers. And at 10, then we'd also be talking to Pawan Goyal, Executive Director and Chief Business Officer at Naukri.com, to talk about their growth roadmap as well. So lots of interesting conversations to keep an eye on in today.
Hi there, welcome back. Still tuned into Market Cafe. You're watching ET Now. Thanks so much for staying tuned to us this morning. Let's take it across to my colleague Jinay, who has a list of all the stocks that are going to be potential buzzers in today's trading session, either on the back of their individual news flows or also, I believe, Jinay, you have details of block deals that took place yesterday. So take us through that entire list that you have for us this morning.
Well, yes, we'll start with the Go Digits results which came up for Q4 of FY 2024. The gross written premium stood at 2,336 crores, which was an uptick of around 19.5%, and the net profit stood at 53 crores versus 26 crores on year-on-year basis. Moving on, keep your eyes on BL Kashyap. The company's market cap is around 2,051 crores. They have bagged two new orders worth around 1,021 crores. Also, HCL Tech will be in focus as they have partnered with IPO Bank for a $278 million partnership for around 7.5 years. TVS Supply Chain will be in focus as they have signed a 5-year contract with Daimler Truck AG, and on the back of bulk deals, Ador Welding will be focused as Ashish Kacholia has sold around 3.9 lakh shares at a price of 1,255, and Quant Mutual Fund has bought 3.8 lakh shares at 1,255. Also, Om Infra will be focused as Om Kothari Foundation has sold around 5.83 lakh shares at the price of 130, and Quant Mutual Fund has bought around 16.9 lakh shares at the price of 130 per share.
Alright, thanks Jinay for that list. So there you have it. That was the list of stocks that you should keep an eye on in today's trading session. But we have Ansh as well standing by to tell us what the futures and options roundup looks like. Ansh?
Right, so let's start with Nifty first. Index missed around 20 points from touching that record high. It faced some strong selling pressure of days high, but it still managed to close around flat levels. Now, if we see index options, we are seeing put writing happening at 23,200, indicating good support around that level. Whereas if we talk about Nifty Bank, then the index has been declining for second session. But if you'll see on chart, it has been actually consolidating for third session. So here we are seeing a bias of neutral, actually not negative. Whereas if we talk about index options, today we have a Nifty Bank weekly option expiry as well, so we may expect some heavy volatility, so keep an eye on banking stock. And here we are seeing put writing happening at 49,500, indicating good support base around this level, and we are just 200 points away from this. So this is a level where we may face a good support base if we see a downside today. Let's see what FIs did in previous session. And we are seeing that in index futures, they added around 15,500 long contracts. They covered around 2,600 contracts. So net to net, we are seeing addition of around 18,000 contracts, due to which the total long has come up from 34.2% to 36.6%. Lastly, let's have a quick view on few FNO stocks that are in focus. And we are seeing significant long build-up in GMR Airport, Sun TV and Petronet, where a short build-up in Interglobe Aviation, Hindustan Copper and Havels. Also in ban list today, we have Balrampur Chini, GMR Infra, Hindustan Copper, India Cement, SAIL and Z. So keep an eye on the stocks.
All right, Ansh, thanks so much for taking us through that list. We're also going to be keeping a close eye on the stocks along with Nifty Bank, because the weekly expiry is today. So watch out for all of those stocks as well as the Nifty Bank index as well. But let's move on and kickstart the coverage this morning on what brokerages are flagging off for us. First up, you have Systematics that has initiated coverage on Krishna Diagnostics with a buy rating. My colleague Gaurav is joining us this morning to give us more details on this brokerage note. Gaurav, hi, take it away.
Well, yes, Krishna Diagnostic is definitely going to be in focus because now Systematics has initiated with buy rating and a target price of 841 rupees, which leaves a healthy upside of around 40% from the current market price. What they believe is that the company is in B2G segment, which is business to government segment, which actually assures volumes with low competitive risk. Apart from that, if you look at the track record over the last 5 years, company has delivered around 25% CAGR in terms of earnings, and from here on, they're expecting for the next 2 years, the company will deliver CAGR around 47%. If you look at the revenue mix, now the company is going to tilt this revenue mix more towards the radiology in future, which will help them with the earnings. And if you look at the business model, it is built around PPP, which is public-private partnership model, which actually ensures the volumes are driven by pricing strategy. Lastly, if you look at the return profile, company has a weak return profile, but if you look at fundamentals, it has strong fundamentals because around 37% of the investment generated ROCE of around 35% for the company. From here on, they are going to work on the B2C segment. They are going to strengthen this segment with around 1900 collection centers. And lastly, they are also set to tap the secular lower double-digit growth is what Systematics is believing, and that is why they are being bullish on this company. So definitely watching out on Krishna Diagnostic, because we are seeing more than 40% potential in terms of stock price if we consider Systematics target price for this stock.
Alright, thanks Gaurav for that update coming in. So let's keep it going with brokerage notes, but let's shift focus to industrials then. And UBS has named CG Power HAL as well as ABB as their top picks. Vinny standing by with more updates. Vinny, tell us about what UBS had to say as well as what Goldman Sachs said about Thermax as well as Cummins.
So absolutely, a lot of industrials are going to be in focus today because we have brokerage notes starting with UBS. UBS said that one, they expect most policy initiatives to continue. The themes of industrial will continue to do well. So whether you look at defense manufacturing, electrification, mobility, as well as industrial efficiency, that is going to be sustaining momentum. And overall, they believe CG Power was the most discussed stock given the exposure to the multiple themes that it has. But in their top pick, they have CG Power, HAL, as well as ABB in the pecking order that was mentioned, starting with CG Power, HAL and ABB. Let's move on to the next one. Then we have Goldman Sachs that's come out with a note on Thermax as well as Cummins. Now Thermax, they said that they're positive given that the demand outlook is positive. They expect power, steel, food, pharma sectors to drive the growth further. And then in the next couple of years also, they believe that the market is watching out for it. This could see a multiple growth as well, higher multiple growth, as well as they've given a target price of 2,710 rupees, though they continue to maintain their sell rating, but still they see a lot of positive outlooks for Thermax. Lastly, in terms of Cummins, overall the domestic demand they believe is outlook offset is by other export weakness that they're seeing. Domestic demand is much stronger, though there is export weakness, and they saw some moderation due to pre-buying driven by the emission norms change. Potential price discovery for this is going to be watched out for, as well as neutral rating is what they're maintaining, and a target price of 1,940 rupees per share.
Well, absolutely. Thanks, Vinny, for that roundup. Let's keep it going with brokerages then. Let's take a look at what Citi had to say about IndusInd Bank then, and they're saying that they're confident of loan growth by 18 to 20%. They're seeing a growth led by gradual rise in retail, and they're also looking at balanced vehicle mix as well as scale up of the new businesses. Now, in terms of the traction in MFI, that is something that they're seeing sustaining, and that is something that they see as a key lever for growth as well. Now, in terms of what the management had to say, they're also talking about how the management expects deposits to gather pace as well. And Citi is maintaining a buy with a target price of 2,010 rupees. So that's the word coming in, and they've, in terms of their estimates then, they've also talked about the financial year 25-26 estimates of 17% loan growth, steady NIMs, as well as 1.2% credit cost and ROAs above 1.8% as well. So that's the verdict coming in on IndusInd Bank there. Let's also shift focus to Titan then and take a look at what Morgan Stanley had to say. They have an equal weight rating on the counter, target at 3,526. And they're saying that the focus is on driving market share from 8% currently. And they're also talking about how the company is prioritizing investments to drive growth. So that is something that they see leading growth as well. And they're also talking about how the management sees downward pressure on margins. So that also is something that Morgan Stanley flagged about Titan. Let's shift focus to Tata Motors then, and CLSA came out with a note where they're talking about how the management is confident on winning in the domestic segment. They're maintaining an outperform rating with a target at 1,181. And when you take a look at the segments and what they've talked about in terms of the segments, then CLSA has talked about the PV segment in terms of the sustainable share gain. And when you talk about the EV segment, they've flagged the continued leadership, and that is something that they've highlighted. Now, lastly, when you take a look at what CLSA had to say about CV demand, then they're seeing a growth of 4 to 5% CAGR coming in for the next few years. So that is the verdict coming in on Tata Motors from CLSA, Snehi. But which are the ones that you're looking at?
Well, yes, Shansi, thanks for taking us through that entire list of all the brokerages and what they're flagging off for us this morning. I'm going to keep it going with brokerage notes this morning because trust me, we do have a whole host of them. Let me start by talking about what Morgan Stanley is flagging off for the housing finance companies. Remember yesterday, the extension to the PMAY or the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana scheme was announced to 3 crore more houses. But while the street took this positively in terms of both real estate developers as well as home financiers, Morgan Stanley has come out with a slightly different view this morning. They believe that the PMAY initiatives for housing might not help the housing finance companies' earnings so much. They also say that the PMAY announcements are good for sentiments, but credit subsidy scheme might be more beneficial if that scheme is announced in the future. But they also have a constructive view on most of the housing finance companies. They believe that valuations are attractive as of now for these companies relative to their operating performances. And let me take take you through the pecking order of what they're liking among the entire housing finance space. From the 12-month perspective, first up they like PNB Housing, followed by Aptus Value, that is followed by Home First Finance, and lastly at Canfin Homes. All of these stocks have been rated overweight by Morgan Stanley. However, on the flip side, they have an equal weight rating on LIC Housing Finance as well as Aavas Financiers. While this was Morgan Stanley's view on housing finance companies, let's also take a look at what Citi has to say, because Citi has also come out with a note on housing finance companies this morning. They say that the extension of the CLSA's subsidy, which is the credit-linked subsidy, will also be critical to improve finance demand visibility. That is what Morgan Stanley has also said. They believe that Home First and one of the leading housing finance companies. They've participated actively under this PMAY CLSS scheme as well. So Citi is liking Home First at the moment, and they also believe that Home First is benefiting 35 to 40% of its customer base. So Home First is the top pick for Citi among the entire housing finance pack. Let me shift focus from housing finance. Let's talk about gas companies, natural gas particularly, because Morgan Stanley has come out with a note on these, and they say that inclusion of natural gas under the GST is potentially benefiting the entire value chain when it comes to gas companies. Remember, yesterday we also heard what Hardeep Singh Puri had to say about the inclusion of petrol and diesel under the GST ambit, and that's a work in progress as of now. Morgan Stanley believes that exploration and producer companies like ONGC and Oil India are the biggest beneficiaries if this does go under the ambit of GST. They estimate a roughly 5% upside to ONGC standalone earnings and a 3 to 4% upside for Oil India this morning. Indiranagar Gas and Gujarat Gas, they believe they stand to benefit as gas becomes more favorable compared to alternative fuels. GAIL and Petronet LNG will stand to benefit with growing gas consumption in India as well. And target they've given for GAIL at 225 rupees per share, for Gujarat Gas at 614 rupees per share, for ONGC at 302, and Oil India at 745 rupees per share. And Morgan Stanley is overweight on all of these stocks. And for Petronet LNG, however, they have an equal weight rating with a price target of 239 rupees per share.
Alright, then with that, we're completely timed out on this edition of Market Cafe on ET Now. From me, Shreyansi Singh, Snehi Shah, as well as the entire team that put this show together, thank you so much for tuning in. You don't go anywhere because the market takes all of the action forward.